Hello and welcome to another video on my Web API.NET Basics tutorial series. So once again, as always, go ahead and follow me on GitHub, visit my website, and of course, if you have any questions, please go ahead and send me an email. Now, in this video number 11, we'll finally start some coding. In the last few videos, I've mostly been talking about tools and some my approach to software development and things like that. But now, finally, we are at a point where I've gone ahead and I think I've put all the foundational knowledge in the previous videos, and now it's time to finally do some coding with Visual Studio and things like that. Now, the projects that we are building are ultimately, they boil down to a backend and a front end. That's really all they do at the end of the day. So if I go to my Paint software here, so most of the time what we'll be doing is we'll build items in the backend, which is really the API. This is where much of the work will happen. And then I have a very simple Razor pages based MVC Razor web app. This is very simplistic, just basic bootstrap, old school, file loading kind of system, nothing fancy, no React.js here. Which means the focus is going to be mostly on the back end. 90% of the time, the videos will be focusing on the backend part of the front. Now, of course, I want to show, like, for example, one of the first things we'll build is a simple CRUD endpoint to add a new coupon to the project, read the coupons, update the coupons and delete the coupons and stuff like that. That is really what we are going to do in the beginning. So that's where the backend will get developed, and then we will connect the backend to the MVC Razor app so that we can use the API service. So that is all we are going to do, which means, so before we can start building the final project, you have to first know how the API system works in .NET. How do you start off with an API project? What are the different components? So, the good thing about Visual Studio is that because it is a framework and it's been there for so long, we get ready to use templates, which do a lot of heavy lifting for us. That's one of the reasons why I like working on .NET. A lot of things are ready to use, and it gives you a head start when it comes to building projects. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to now here, let's stop here for a bit. Most of the time when you open this, you'll probably have Visual Studio something like this. Okay, so we are now focused on Web API. So I want to go ahead and change the language to C#. Platform, I am on Windows, but you can choose whichever platform you're on. And here there are so many project types, and I'm interested in Web API for now. I'll select that, and now it boils down to two options. Now remember, depending on how many packages we installed, you may have more options on your screen, but for me, I only have the things I need, and there we go. Now you'll see there are two of them. One of them is something about native AOT. I have no idea what that is, so I don't care about it. Now what I care about is this one, which is ASP.NET Core Web API. In case you're seeing multiple web APIs on a computer, it's probably the older .NET. You have to understand, there used to be an older .NET. It's still there. It's not like it's gone or anything. But we are on .NET Core, which now has the name .NET. So there is the .NET Classic, where you might see words like 4.6 or 4.7, 4.8. We don't have that. So if you see that, then you need to not use that. So I'm using ASP.NET Core Web API. That's what you should use as well. So let's go ahead and select that. I'll click next. And here you can give any name you want, but as I mentioned before, give your meaningful names. Make sure you put this, where you want to track your progress and everything. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to create a folder on my desktop here, just for my own practice. You may want to put your code in your GitHub if you want to track what you're doing. That's really your call. So I'm going to say temp delete September 25, 2024. Okay, now there we go. And then let's go ahead and select the folder. And here I'm going to say hello world web API, because that's what this is. So this is your first exposure to building some web API. So I want to make sure that, again, give meaningful names. Okay, now this location is fine. Put whatever you want, wherever you want to keep it. But you know what? I would request you, don't keep your code to a folder which is connected to your iCloud drive or OneDrive. It really is a bad idea Okay, I'm not going to get too deep into why that is a bad idea, but just know this much. See, every time you make file changes, your cloud servers will start syncing things. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does slow down things, especially if you're on a bad internet connection. And even then, you shouldn't be syncing your project files to the cloud. So please put your project folders in a non-cloud connected folder. You have GitHub if you want to back up your code. Anyway, that's just a short rant from me. Okay, so there we go. And let's go ahead and click on next. And again, you'll get the framework thing. We are using .NET 8, and then authentication step none. Make sure you use the HTTPS version. Make sure you support OpenAPI. That is your Swagger thing. Make sure you use controllers. Don't worry about the container and stuff like that. Not right now. I mean, eventually I will be making videos about using Docker and containers, but we are not there yet. It's very, very far away from now. So we'll worry about that when we reach that stage. So once this is set, click create, and it'll take a few seconds. Depending on how fast your computer is, it can take a few seconds or it can take a minute. I do not know. And this is what you will see. Now, because this is the first time you're building a project, I think I should go ahead and explain to you the different parts of what you see here. So let's go ahead and do this one. The main things, which are, as always, the main things that I'm talking about. On the right side, you have the Solution Explorer. So Solution Explorer is where you'll be looking at all your files and all the projects. Now, please understand, as the classes progress, as these videos progress, we start building a big project. We won't always have a single project. We will be using multi-project scenarios. So you'll be shifting and juggling between multiple projects in a single solution. It can get pretty confusing. I admit it will get confusing, but it is essential though. Okay, so it is what it is. So yeah, this is the Solution Explorer. You can see all your files, your dependencies and things like that. So please go ahead, take a minute or two to explore all the things here. Okay, so you have the launch settings.json where you'll find the launch URL. For example, right now, let me just quickly do that before I come to that. Yeah, just look at your files. The main files would be right now launch settings.json, and then of course the controls folder where we build all the API endpoints. And then you want to go ahead and look at app settings.json where we're putting things like connection string and authentication keys, secret keys and stuff like that. And of course the program.cs where you'll be doing a lot of dependency injection. So as the videos progress, you'll be building new services, you'll be building new interfaces, you'll be implementing them, and if you want to use them in your controller, the only way is, of course, well, not the only way, but the more elegant way is to inject them in your program.cs. So that is the way to do it. So these are the main things, and of course we'll have other folders that we'll be creating for our projects and things like that. Again, we'll worry about that later. So in this one, I don't want to get into building any actual API controllers or endpoints. There's already a controller written for us here by the template. For now, that is good enough. In a future episode, we'll talk about AIF core, we'll talk about databases, and then we'll finally add our own data models and stuff like that. We'll come to that later. So you should have this much ready. So Solution Explorer is here. The next thing is on the bottom, you have something called Package Manager Console. Very, very useful. So this is useful when you want to add some packages. Because this is your first video, let's go ahead and add a package, even though we won't be using it. So I'll go here on the right side. There are many ways to add packages. But what I like is I like to go here on right click on the project, not the solution. I've seen some people do that. Right click on the project and you'll see a button called manage NuGet packages. So go ahead and do that and you'll see all the packages which are already installed, which is fine. There is an option to update packages. If you want to, you can do it. Even if you don't update the package, it doesn't really matter because we're not building anything advanced. If there is any specific library or something where you have to update the package, I will let you know. But as of now, even if it says updates available, don't worry about it. It won't affect your training in any way. So come back here. So I just want to show you how to install a package. So let's try to install a package called Newtonsoft, which is useful in our big project that we are going to build. We'll be using a lot of JSON serialization and deserialization. So we'll be doing that and we definitely need Newtonsoft for that. So it's already here. I can find it here directly. That's one way, or I can search for it. I can say new. There you go. Oh man. I'm yawning, I'm sorry. It's afternoon, I guess, that's why I'm yawning. So there you go, this is the package I want, and I can just say install. You'll usually get some kind of accept or apply or terms and conditions and so on and so forth. And I think it's done. Yeah, if you go to check installed, you'll see that it is installed. So usually it takes very few seconds, but there are some packages which are really big, because every package depends on other packages. So you install one package, you are actually installing a lot of dependent packages as well. This Newtonsoft doesn't seem to have any dependencies, I guess, so it's an independent package, so you don't see much of that. But there are some other packages. When you install, a lot of other things get installed as well. You'll see such things in a future episode. So that's about the NuGet packages. You also have something called Packager Console. Just remember this. If you don't see this one, go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and Package Manager Console. We do need the Package Manager Console as we work on projects. Another area you want to keep an eye out on. And another box you want to look at is the output box. It's right there. And also the error list, where you see errors. Very useful to look at it. And also this is the same area where when you're debugging, you look at values and stuff like that. This is the one other area for you to look about. Now on the bottom right corner, you have all these source control repository. You don't have to worry about that, because I've already made videos about how to use GitHub. So if you want to track your project, if you want to do version control, I'll also be doing version control as the videos progress. So in this one, I'm not using any version control, but I will as the days go by. So the idea is very simple. You want to go ahead and make sure that, what do you say, you don't have to worry about this. Don't try to do source control from Visual Studio. I don't recommend it. Just do it the normal Git way, using the terminal on VS Code. That is the better way of doing it. And I'll be doing it as well, so you'll see it as the classes progress. Next, coming to the top left corner, the main button here would be build. I always like to go and say build, rebuild. I don't know why. I mean, the build option is the same, and I think rebuild is the same. People say something about cache clearing and stuff like that. Maybe that is why. But either way, I always do build, rebuild, but you are welcome to just do build. It's your call. Next, you have the debug option. We'll be using this a lot. So as and when I use it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Other than that, I don't think we'll be using anything else. So these are the main buttons that you'll see me using a lot: build, debug, solution explorer on the right side. On the bottom, you have the package manager console, error list, output. These are the things I will be using. So just these are the areas I want you to get familiar with. Everything else, all the other options, you can explore if you want, but I don't really care for it right now. And again, don't do version control from Visual Studio. I don't recommend it. So next, let's go ahead and run this project then. So let's see how an API looks. So I'll go to build, rebuild again, make sure there are no errors, and I will run this. And I have forgotten to get water once again. So let me get some water. All right then. So now you can see on the screen right now, you have a very simple API with a single endpoint. As we progress in these videos, we'll be building different kind of APIs that get data, the APIs that return data, APIs that update data, APIs that allow upload of files, so on and so forth. But right now, this is the default template. It's something called weather forecast, and you have one endpoint called get weather forecast. So to use that, this is what is called as Swagger. Okay, so I'm using Google Chrome here. Now this is also something which might be important. Like, what happens is, in one of the earlier videos, I told you have to use multiple browsers, right? So now for debugging, you can choose the browser you want, and this can be very useful when you're working. So if you click on this button here, the green button, and if you scroll down, there is an option called web browser, and shows all the browsers that are installed on my computer. So right now you can see I have Firefox, Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and Opera. Now here, as of now, as I like to use Google Chrome for debugging. Definitely Firefox also is really good. But for this video, I'm going to stick with Google Chrome. But if you want to change it, it's very easy. Go ahead and click on change it, and then run, and Firefox will show up right away. There it is. But I'm going to go back to using Chrome right now, because I've seen when it comes to developer tools, Chrome seems to have all the latest features. Not so much with Firefox or Edge and other browsers. So we're going to stick to Chrome for debugging. So there it is. I'm going to go and run it, and I have the Swagger UI. So this is called the Swagger UI. I think now they call it Open API. So there you go, Swagger Open API. So this is where, now why do I like the Swagger UI? Because it gives you an interactive, ready to use, endpoint explorer. Okay, so like I have built an endpoint. I mean, I didn't build it, it was already there in the, I can go to weather controller. You see here that you have a nice API already being built. You have the endpoint also here. Okay, so now I want to test this endpoint. Now there are many ways to test endpoints. You can use curl, you can use postman, but the Swagger UI makes things very convenient because it's right there in front of you. So now let's test it out. So I go here, you'll see that this is a get endpoint. Get endpoint is usually for getting information from the server. Okay, so let's, here it's going to give us, it's given like an example value. There is some media type, there are a lot of these media types, we'll talk about that later, but most of the time we are using application JSON, so we'll just stick to that. And then now there's a nice button called try it out, so click on that and you'll get a nice button called execute. Now there are no parameters or anything right now. Again, parameters we'll see in the future. Now all I want right now is I just want to do a simple get call, and if I click on execute, you will see here that I get a nice response body. Now this is what is called as JSON. JSON is the standard format used in any type of data exchange situation, especially with backend services. So any API that, any modern API, you may heard a word like REST and stuff like that. You will see that the response is JSON. And you can see that right now. But where is this coming from? Let's do a little bit of investigation. So I'm going to go back to my project. You can see in the bottom, the orange bar is on. So that means the project is still running. So we'll leave it running. And I already told you, now if you look at the endpoint, start matching the names. So you look at this, the name of this category of endpoints, you can see here, is weather forecast. So that's the controller name. So we are going to go to Solution Explorer controller weather forecast. That's the name. And here you'll see that you have the title here. It says get/weather forecast. You have this exact word, get/weather forecast. So now if I put a breakpoint here, okay, now I put a breakpoint there, and now I go ahead and click on try it out, and I'll click on execute, and the breakpoint was activated. So we know for sure that is where the information is coming from. So if I click continue, the data is now available here. Now let's do the same thing on Postman. So I'm going to go ahead. Hopefully you have installed all the tools needed for the training. I already made a lot of videos about this, so hope you did all that before coming here. So here I have a collection here. I already talked about Postman before, so I'm going to quickly jump for it. So here I'm going to say I'll create a new request, and I'll call this get weather, and today is September 25. Okay, there you go. And what I want is I want to call that API endpoint. So I'll come back here, and if I look at this, you see here there's something called curl. There you go. That's what I was talking about. But I'm not interested in curl right now. I don't want to try curl right now. I want to stick to the basics of using Postman. So this is the request URL. I'll copy that request URL, put that here, and I'm going to hit save. And then I'll hit send, and look at that. Oh, there you go. Again, the breakpoint. Cool, it's working. And I get the JSON response here. So which means when you're trying to test your API, you actually have two options out of the box. You can test your API directly on the Swagger OpenAPI situation, or you can test your API on the Postman. Now, which one is better? Which one you should use when? I'll leave for you to figure it out on your own experience. There are times when I only use Swagger. There are times when I only use Postman. Like right now, I'm using both of them. So which one to use, when to use, I'll leave that to you. So this is what we have. Now, what if we want to make some minor changes, right? So let's try to understand. So I'm going to stop running the project here. Let me write some code. So I'll come here to this one. Now, I don't want to touch this original code. So I'm just going to copy paste this. I should get a red line because, the names and everything is same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this one to get weather part 2. And I am going to give this name here as well. Let me see if that worked. So I'm going to build, rebuild. No errors or anything. Let me run this. And oh, it doesn't like it. It doesn't like it. I have seen this before. It doesn't like it. Okay, all right. So let's come back here. What I want to do is I would like to go ahead and let me see. So I'm going to keep this one. Let me not introduce any complex scenarios in my very first video. So let's go back to this one. Let's stick to the default one. Okay, I don't want to experiment on my first video, right? So let's make sure it's back in action. Okay, it's working again. I'm just going to double check it's back in action. There you go. See, another thing though, in the tutorial videos, I don't have an editor or anything, so my videos will be raw as, and if I make a mistake, that'll still be recorded and that'll still be uploaded, so that if when you're trying to learn, you'll see that, if you make an error, I made error as well. I hope that is actually a good thing and not a bad thing. So there we go. So I'm going to leave that part as it is. So now what I want to do is I want to modify this a little bit. So what I'll do is, instead of directly returning it, I'm just going to go ahead and say, I'm going to say var weather response. Okay. And I'll take all this. I'll take this whole thing and I'll put this here. And then I am going to say return weather response. Just a little bit of changes. Okay. So now I want to put the breakpoint here, and I'll put the breakpoint here, just making it a little bit different. So here I want to once again run this, and I'm going to try it out. It stops there. And it still stops here, and I can put the cursor on top of weather response, and I see here that I am actually getting like a nice little array, and I can look at all the values. See, this is very important in debugging. A lot of times you're not getting the value you're expecting, then you go back and start debugging. So that's what I'm trying to show you right now. So you can do that, right? So it's returning some random 5 days of weather. Now what if we want, you'll notice it's an array, so it's 0 1 2 3 4 5, so 5, there we go. But if the counting starts from 0, ends at 4. What if we want 10? Let's see if we can do that. So I'm going to click on continue, and yeah, the data is coming. So where is that 5 coming from? So I think there is something called, let me remove the breakpoint here. So there's range 1 to 5. So what I'll do is, instead of editing it directly, let me create 2 variables. So I'm going to say var range beginning equals 1, and I'm going to say var range end equals 5, and I will go ahead and use these variables here. Instead of using absolute values, I'm going to use the variable values, right? And now I see it looks okay. Now I'm going to build and rebuild. We should get the same output. We'll still get 5 weather items. Okay, there it is, same 5 before, so the code is still working. Now I want to see 10. So what I will do is I'll go back here, and I'm going to say I'll change this range end to 10. I think I pressed insert accidentally. Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, 10. There we go. So now if I rebuild, and I run this, I should get 10 items. There it is. So I do have 10 items. Seems to work just fine. So that is how you can make some small changes. Okay, so that's all there is to it. So there you go, and you can do the same thing on Postman. I can click on send, and again the breakpoint will get triggered, and here also in Postman I see 10 values. So far so good. So there you go, my dear students. So that is your first exposure to Visual Studio and all the different components in Visual Studio, and also how we can make some simple changes to your control, so you can modify the behavior and things like that, and where the data is coming from, and putting some breakpoints and so on and so forth. So there's obviously a lot more to API development than just this much. We will cover those things as the videos progress, but for now, that is your hello world API controller situation. I want to show you the web API template. I've done that. Program.cs, I've shown that. Program says we'll dig deeper as the videos progress. Like right now, there isn't much to do there. Controller.cs, I showed you the controller, Swagger UI endpoint. We already have one endpoint, so we did that. And then of course, I showed you how we can do the same thing that we did on Swagger with Postman. And that is where I'm going to wrap it up for now.